We have finally made it here into the top 20 teams in my 2026 Deep Dive series. My number 20 team, the Atlanta Falcons. Thanks for coming back. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button if I haven't covered your team already. Now you won't miss it. And more people are going to get to see this if this is in fact their favorite team. Or maybe you're hate watching this because you don't like the Falcons. There's a lot to like about the Falcons. There's a lot to not like about the Falcons. What is there to like? The direction change. Kevin Stefanski, the new head coach, tremendous change. I'm not high on Stefanski, like super high on him as a coach, but it's at least a step, I think, in the right direction for what this team wants to achieve when you have the weapons that you have in Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and the emerging Kyle Pitts especially. We know Kevin Stefanski loves those tight ends. We saw what Harold Fannin did just a year ago with Cleveland. We saw what David Njoku was able to do with Cleveland as well. An offensive line that lost Caleb McGarry, brought in Jawan Taylor. So it's still a really good offensive line that's really just seeking out the quarterback that Kevin Stefanski needs to build here. And they've been unafraid of throwing assets at the position. We saw Kirk Cousins get the big contract. Michael Penix get selected eighth overall, I believe it was, in that draft, being like, we're going to throw it out. One of them is going to work. Well, looks like both of them might not have worked. Michael Penix is still pending. He is in a true quarterback competition now with former Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. They've committed to the lefty at least, so it's not going to be able to flip-flop the play calling and all that stuff, which is actually pretty important. All the plays are now going to be designed for a left-handed quarterback. Doesn't matter which one is in. That's a key component to what we're going to be talking about here with the success of the quarterback, and it's a true competition. So it's hard to say who's going to get out there. It's hard to say who's even truly better between the two of them. That'll be really something for the summer to decide for the most part. Getting on the defensive side, this is a problem. A little bit of a problem because the front four, you threw two assets in Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr., and Jalen Walker's been fine. James Pierce looked great, but then just can't keep his hands to himself and can't not get arrested for some serious stuff. Not quite Terry and Arnold, but still serious stuff. Don't know what that suspension is going to look like, but we'll talk about what his impact would be when he was on the field, assuming he doesn't miss an extended amount of time, because we know how the NFL is when it comes to these types of suspensions. They're pretty light in the loafers. Linebackers, we'll get to that, but the secondary looks great with Watts and Bates in the back end. AJ Terrell joined by his brother Avion Terrell. We'll get to how that's going to impact. Mike Hughes, one of the most underrated corners in the entire league. We'll get to my thoughts on him as well. But this really all comes around to the quarterback and who is getting the quarterback up to speed here, and that's Kevin Stefanski, the coaching staff. So Kevin Stefanski comes in as my 24th ranked head coach. After his stint with the Browns and all that, I just wasn't all that impressed with Stefanski. He was the most hot and cold head coach that the league had over the last 5 years or so. Winning Coach of the Year twice, but then just coaching horrific teams surrounding those awards. Never really got anything going at the quarterback position. People say Deshaun Watson was forced on him. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt there. But he really had a lot of opportunities to build the team he wanted to build. He had a generational talent on the defensive side of the ball. It never really worked out there. Now, you can blame the organization of Cleveland if you would like to. But there was also a lot of issues with what Kevin Stefanski was doing from a leadership perspective, from a offensive play caller perspective. It was littered with inconsistency. So it is very difficult to do anything other than put him in this range here. Now, it is going to be tier 3 offensive coaching for the Atlanta Falcons. He does have Tommy Rees as his offensive coordinator. We'll see how their relationship continues to grow. You see both of them rocking the Browns logo there. So some familiarity. But Stefanski is really the one that runs the show. It's his offense. It's those wide zone concepts that you get from the, quote, Shanahan tree, the Shanahan-McVay tree. And now with having Bijan Robinson, I think this opens up a huge opportunity for Stefanski to actually use this offense the way he was using it when Nick Chubb was healthy. where you got this great dynamic running attack that was able to then set up the play action the way you really wanted to use it. And I think that the last couple of years here, once Nick Chubb got hurt in Cleveland, that all kind of just went away. You can talk about Quinson Judkins being a good back, and he was good for a rookie, but he wasn't anybody that was a true threat that defenses really had to respect, that defenses really had to stack the box against, especially when there wasn't that threat at quarterback. But now with Bijan, I think that this really suits that wide zone concept into the play action pass. And I think that that's where this offense is really going to potentially have its pop-off moment. We'll see what the quarterbacks are able to produce. Because he also wants the passing game to be explosive. And when you have quarterbacks who, you look at Tua, who doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. You look at Penix, who doesn't have the best arm talent in the world. It does affect this team's ability to get that explosive passing game that they want to have. Now, he loves working the multiple tight ends, where you have Kyle Pitts, who is sort of an inline tight end / slot receiver. We'll see how they mix in the multiple tight end sets, but this offense is very much set up for Kyle Pitts to have a huge year to sort of piggyback off of what he did just last season, which was a career season. We'll see how he gets used in this, but I think with the way they want to use the wide zone, the play action, it is going to open up a lot of opportunities for him because of the lack of high-end quarterback talent. We're going to get a lot of quarterback-friendly concepts. A lot of rhythm throws are going to be coming out of this. Floods to one side of the field to make the reads a little easier, get those high-low reads for the quarterbacks. And the crossing routes, create chaos for the linebackers, have the defensive backs have to hand off and pass off on routes. And that opens up huge opportunities, especially when you got two big catch radius guys in Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Mixing those two in, now what you have outside of those guys in terms of downfield threats is still very much up in the air. He added Zachariah Branch to sort of maybe help out with that, maybe get some more rhythm throwing, some yak in there. Help out the quarterbacks, get the ball out of their hands quickly. So I can see the intent behind that type of draft pick. And then they also picked up Brian Robinson, and that's going to help keep the running game going. Brian Robinson Jr., of course, did spend some time in San Francisco recently, where he was very used to this type of offensive concept. So it's going to be a little bit of a lateral move for him schematically to be able to be that spell running back after they lost Tyler Algier, who was probably the best backup running back in the league since Bijan came into the league. Real starting caliber guy, so they do lose a little bit in that, but Stefanski's overall scheme is really going to embrace these two backs in particular, and it works out great for Kyle Pitts as well. How Drake London gets worked into here, that's the explosive downfield passing game, but you need the quarterback to be able to push that ball down the field. I think having structure under center is a huge feature as well for this team. It's going to allow those rhythm throws to really come into play. Those under center play action, 3-step drop ball out, simplification of the offense to get these quarterbacks some confidence and some rhythm. And we'll get to those quarterbacks a little bit later on. But the other thing Stefanski did was he maintained Jeff Ulbrich, who's had a couple of stints as a defensive coordinator, and he's got his work cut out for him. I do think he's a good defensive coach. He's a tier 3 defensive coach for me. Not some high-end potential head coach candidate, but I still think he's a good coach, and he just is out here with a front seven that he really needs to get going. The 4-3 to 4-2-5 base formations, running the single high with some late rotation, having Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts at your disposal, being able to do that, I think is incredibly advantageous. Then you got, the wide 9 with James Pierce and Jalen Walker, Samson Ebukam and all that. They got to get that group going if James Pierce is even able to play. It's even with him starting, it's still not the greatest group in the world that we'll get to inevitably. The 4-man rush dependency of a Jeff Ulbrich defense is, again, you need that high-end talent. They invested in it, sure, and they got some decent work out of their rookies last season in different ways. But there still is lacking that, especially up the middle. They're very incredibly undersized, which we'll get to, which does hurt their ability to get that four-man rush going. It hurts their ability to protect themselves against the run as well. So you can't even have these guys truly pin their ears back and just go after the quarterback, because that's going to leave you so incredibly vulnerable due to the lack of size. Like Zach Harrison and Brandon Dorless, like they're not the biggest guys in the world, and they're all playing interior defensive lineman roles. So to sort of maybe help them out, you're going to see the cover 3 and cover 1 press on the outsides with Mike Hughes and AJ Terrell. Avian Terrell is there now. We'll see how they mix those 3 guys in to try and help out. And then you have Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts obviously sort of commanding the back end. So it's a really good cornerback group to help out what you have in the front 7, but the front 7 can't get anything really going, then that's where you're going to run into issues. And to try and help that out when they are going to be blitzing, it'll be from the nickel and the inside linebackers. We'll see the blitzes come from there to try and sort of just throw off the offensive line's ability to shift blocking assignments over and hopefully get a free runner out of it. It's not a bad staff. It's really not. It's not a staff I don't have confidence in. It just feels like a staff with a very low ceiling, right? Even though they are like tier 3, there's nothing in this staff that makes me go that they can outperform this tier ranking, especially this season. The only way really is if they truly get the quarterback position going on the offense, if they can get something in the top 20 out of their pass rush, and what they can do with getting some bigger space-eating interior defensive linemen on their roster that aren't really these high-end talents, like a Mason Smith, for example, who they just acquired from Jacksonville, to get those guys going and to get them into situations to succeed. Because right now you're really just mixing in a giant rotation on your interior defensive line and a very shallow edge rushing group. And those are really key spots, the quarterback and the edge rush. So it's just not looking up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thumbs up the video so more people get to see it. Really appreciate it. Helps the channel grow. And what's going to help this team grow is the quarterback succeeding. And it's important that they do. And we're actually going to talk about both of them here. So this is looking like a little bit of a new screen here for the quarterbacks, because we have a true quarterback competition breaking out here in Atlanta. And for me personally, they both graded out the exact same. Now, they got some differences to their game, obviously, but they both come in as a 74 for me. That's 27th to 28th in the league for starters. Not a, kind of like the coaching staff, not the highest of ceilings that I can project for either one of these guys. You know, especially Tua, who's been in the league for a while, just doesn't have the arm strength. But we'll start with Michael Penix here. Drafted 8th overall, was sort of thrust into the starting lineup for the most part. And what I see in Michael Penix is just, I was never excited about him coming out of college into the NFL. I thought that he was like a second round talent, probably, like the teams that missed out on the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the draft, that he was, you know, quarterback 6 maybe to come out. And he was the 4th quarterback off the board in a very quarterback heavy class, including Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. JJ McCarthy was the other one. I just thought that it was just not a great idea, and it hasn't really worked out. And there isn't really any signs in Michael Penix's game that he's going to be a top level NFL quarterback that's gonna live up to that top 10 pick designation. He doesn't really have great poise in the pocket. Doesn't really have great escape ability. Can't really get to his next read if it's covered up, because like even when he's not getting blitz, he's not scanning the field well. Even when, you know, his offensive line does hold up, he's got a good offensive line in front of him. He's got a great running game. So, like, he really does have everything that he needs to succeed. At the very least, get top 20, top 25 quarterback production. And he's not even producing like a low-end starter. He's sort of producing just like a backup. Like a backup who's thrust in a little bit in over his head. You know, the play-action game, he was 16th. But, I mean, when you have Bijan Robinson there, like, it's hard to not have a good play-action game. But throwing the ball deep down the field doesn't rank in the top 32. Throwing in the short areas doesn't rank in the top 32. Big-time throws, he was 38th. Turnover-worthy plays, he was 27th. Adjusted completion percentage, he's 36th. It's just not... And it's not that he doesn't have the talent around him. It's not that he doesn't have these opportunities. It doesn't really seem to matter what team he's playing against and what kind of defensive scheme he's facing, what kind of aggressiveness or lack thereof that he's facing when going up against the defense. It all seems that he's just consistently a low ceiling quarterback, that he's a backup quality quarterback who got overdrafted by a desperate team. Now, maybe as you make this adjustment over to Kevin Stefanski, it's a much more quarterback-friendly system than what he had before, especially when you have it from the head coach position. Having Raheem Morris as your head coach is a completely different ball game. So them getting Tua Tagovailoa, though, is just not the greatest sign for what Kevin Stefanski and the staff thinks of Michael Penix, especially because they weren't the ones that drafted him that high, and they simply didn't have a first-round pick in this last draft to go out and replace him. So that's why I guess you go with Tua to try and find something. You want to raise the floor here, and I don't know that Penix has the biggest floor in the world, just doesn't have the experience level and doesn't have like the feet, the arm strength, the arm talent to be a whole lot. And it's a lot of a different grade. I don't know that he's ever going to be better than this 74 grade. And then as we move on here to Tua, somehow less arm strength, but has much better accuracy. I don't think that his poise with all the injuries is that. I think him and Penix have very similar poise. He does have, I think, more accuracy while Penix brings more arm strength, but it really balances it out at the end of the day. And what we saw last year in Miami was, again, very similar from what you saw for Penix. You know, there was a little bit more of an offensive quarterback-friendly system with McDaniel as the head coach, of course. It set him up to have a couple more big-time throws. He performed a little bit better in the deep ball and intermediate and short areas. The play-action game was very similar. Devon Achane being there was advantageous, but Tua is also very familiar with the system. The wide zone, Shanahan system that McDaniel came from, it is a smooth transition here for him. And I think that was also the motivation from Stefanski to actually get him, was he wanted a quarterback who at the very least was familiar with the system, familiar with the rhythms, the calls, the adjustments, and the overall goals week to week and drive to drive that this offense wants to accomplish. Now, with Tua, unlike Michael Penix, now he's obviously been in the league longer, but he did show signs like pre-25 concussions later that he did have something that you could tap into. It was just a matter of building up the confidence to stand there in the pocket and execute the throw step into your throws. And when he was doing that, he was actually quite good at certain points in his career in Miami. So we'll see if maybe that can get unlocked from Kevin Stefanski, because I do think the potential of Tua has shone through even at the early points in his career, unlike Penix. Now, obviously, completely different situations, completely different coaching, but both started with defensive head coaches and both ended up now with offensive coaches, where Tua kind of took off a little bit. Injuries took him down. Penix on the same sort of trajectory. It just is concerning that these are your two options. I don't think that that's out of line to say. Because it's like, okay, yeah, you got a great quarterback competition and the best guy's going to play, but is the best guy even like that high end of a talent? Like how much are you going to rely on Bijan Robinson to carry this offense this upcoming season while you figure out this quarterback situation and while the coaches figure out this, if either one of these guys is even long for this world? I do like the idea that they're both lefty quarterbacks, because now if either one of them plays, you're not changing the offense. You're not flipping the script or anything. There is a significant difference between a right-handed quarterback and a left-handed quarterback. So being able to keep those guys, keep the offense moving in the same way horizontally is actually a huge advantage that when you have a left-handed quarterback, you don't really get that. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel here, some little goodness for the quarterback position. And as long as they play smart football, it should be okay because you have enough talent on the offense for the offense to be at least competitive and productive to some degree. It's when you get into the situations where one of these guys, whoever it is that's playing, has to do something drastic, has to lead a huge drive down the field with his arm. That's where I think they're going to run into some serious issues. So their weapons group is coming in at 22nd to 27th for me. It's really the tale of like two like a high end talents and then like low end mystery veterans with a little maybe this could be good. You know, talking about Zachariah Branch, of course, but Drake London is the star of the passing game. Very much so. Last year, with some inconsistent quarterback play, I thought produced really well. 104 targets, had 68 catches. He was 5th out of 32 in drops percentage. So an incredibly sure-handed big body on the outside, deep threat. You know, did well at all three levels. 17th in deep, 13th in the intermediate, 7th in the short. And for a guy who is very much a deep threat, to have a quarterback that isn't the greatest at getting the ball down the field because of the lack of arm strength, it does sort of limit what he can produce for you. But they were able to use him last year in multiple ways. Like, he was, out of 70 eligible receivers, he was second in the slot. Which for a guy his size, to take almost 34% of his snaps from the slot last year, that's just trying to create matchup issues to sort of hide quarterback deficiencies and offensive deficiencies. That actually worked out really well. And he was 4th against zone, so he was able to settle in zones really well. Being forced into man coverage, he was still 42nd out of 99. And that's like when man coverage down the field, inaccuracy from the quarterback, inconsistent play from the quarterback really comes into play also. He did have 919 yards, 7 touchdowns, only 243 yards after the catch. But Drake London can play at all three levels of the field. Left side, right down the middle, in between the hashes, outside the numbers. Just a matter of getting a quarterback in there that can unlock him fully. Because he's a tremendous talent on the outside. Now, maybe Tua comes in with a little bit more accuracy and they really work the intermediate level of the field all season. And Drake London can be a 1,300 yard receiver in that kind of situation. Especially because if the ball gets anywhere near him, he's going to bring it down more often than not. And I think that's a huge advantage for quarterbacks who don't necessarily have the greatest arm strength, is you have these great big-bodied wide receivers, big-bodied receiving targets who work the intermediate levels of the field really well, you know, running hitch routes and comeback routes and those deep digs and all that. That really works in their favor. So I think that Drake London can find a serious role in this offense with an offensive coach that's been really begging for a top-end wide receiver. It hasn't really had one for the last couple of years that he was used to over in Cleveland. Now comes over here and gets like this high-level talent. But other than him in the wide receiver room, it's a lot of just question marks, right? Like, you got Jahan Dotson and Olamide Zaccheaus, two veterans who, you know, Dotson will have 1 or 2 plays every 4 weeks. And you're like, oh, there's the first round pick. And then he just disappears forever after that. So I don't know that him coming in and being wide receiver 2 in this offense is going to yield a whole lot of fruit for them. Olamide Zaccheaus, he's been around, been in Atlanta, out of Atlanta, to Chicago, to Washington, back to Atlanta. He's like just a low ceiling, like wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type. Maybe can play in the slot a little bit for you, can play outside a little bit for you. But he's not going to be something that's ever going to blow you away. Sort of like another guy like Jahan Dotson. He'll have 1 or 2 plays every couple weeks. Sort of reminds you that he's there. But that's why you go and you get Zachariah Branch out of Georgia, who at the very least can have some dynamic playmaking ability. You know, especially when you have quarterbacks who you don't want to have holding the ball in the pocket, reading 3 or 4 different receivers at a time. You want to get a guy like Zachariah Branch out there who can run a screen pass every now and then, who you can work an RPO swing game with. You know, can run quick little drag routes, you know, quick little passes over the top, quick little posts, quick little slants. That'll really work well, I think, in this offense. We'll just see how much he can actually achieve here. Got Dylan Drummond and Chris Blair again, just sort of low-end guys who they'll be competing, but I don't know how much play they're going to get. But then you get the tight ends, and Kyle Pitts coming off a career year for himself, got his contract extension, had 45% of his snaps at traditional tight end, another 35% from the slot role. But he was really, really great. 114 targets at 88 catches, just short of 1,000 yards, just short of 400 yards after the catch. And where he really worked well was in those short and intermediate areas, which is where this offense with these 2 quarterbacks is really going to live this upcoming season. So his ability to do that, and he was 3rd against man coverage. He was 2nd amongst all tight ends in the slot. It was just really, really well put together for him. How much of a traditional tight end is he going to play? You got Austin Hooper in here. I really like that Kyle Pitts was able to finally get himself going, because he showed that he's that true high-end talent that everyone was looking for when he was drafted 4th overall. And the ability to move him around and play him in a whole bunch of different spots at a whole bunch of different times, that is actually a really great little weapon for Stefanski, because he loves mixing and matching and all that. He loves having a guy he can line up at tight end and then kick him out into the slot and have these matchup issues. Put him way outside and put Drake London in the slot. Having that versatility is only going to help the window dressing that's going to make this offense really function. Great route runner as well. He can catch in traffic and all that. And I think having Austin Hooper as well, having the 2 tight end sets, 2 very different tight ends. Austin Hooper, more traditional tight end. That's going to help this offense be a lot more creative on the back end. And then what can you say about Bijan Robinson? One of the best receiving backs in the entire league. He's in that upper A class, S tier receiving back. Just amazingly dynamic out of the backfield in all ways. Can throw those screen passes out there, those tunnel screens on the outside. Can run some routes out there. Really just get under linebacker skin. You almost have to put a slot, your nickel back on him to really shut him down in the passing game. Not much of a compliment next to him with Brian Robinson, but man, you can get Bijan the ball in a whole bunch of different ways. And again, that's going to be something Kevin Stefanski is going to really want to take advantage of, because, again, of the low ceiling quarterback talent. You window dress this stuff. You use the passing game as an extension of the run game just to get Bijan the ball. You're going to increase the offense's production multiple times over with these types of versatile weapons. You just worry about what happens if one of them goes down. What kind of depth do you have here? They don't have the depth outside of their top stars that can carry this team, that can show up in a week where a defense is particularly well planned out for them, or where the running game just can't quite get going and they've got some lockdown stuff on the outside. Who's going to be the one to step up here if it's not one of these guys? more often than not, you're going to get a great game out of one of these guys. It's going to be those weeks where you need a Zacchaeus or a Dotson to step up. Are they going to be able to accomplish that? And just piggybacking off what we said, running back group, this is the second, it's number 2 for me. A lot of people got Bijan number 1. I got him number 2. Detroit Lion fans, be a fan of mine. Because, spoiler alert, that is the one that I have higher than Bijan. But, man, is Bijan a great back. I can't really sing his praises enough, man. He, talked about him there in the season game, but just going over what he did just last season. Now, this is, again, where his fit with Stefanski is going to work incredibly well, because he had 217 zone run carries last year to just 62 gap carries. So he is every bit fit for this wide zone. He's got great vision, great patience, amazing acceleration, can find the hole, make the guys miss in the hole, can bait linebackers so incredibly well with stretching it out, then cutting back 1-2 gaps over. It is a masterclass to watch Bijan work, getting 1,478 yards, 5.1 yards per carry. He did put the ball on the ground 4 times. Now, I understand that kind of comes with the territory of 279 carries, and a lot of contact, 1,133 yards after contact for Bijan Robinson. He had 16 explosive runs, accounted for 63 first downs, had 86 missed tackles forced. That's just bait and switch on these linebackers, on these defensive ends, on these pursuing safeties and defensive backs. And it's not just the defensive backs that he's able to make miss. He's able to make linebackers miss. You're watching him make edge players and interior defensive linemen miss when he's running closer into the B gaps. He's an all-purpose running back that you need to account for with at least somebody on the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of teams, unless you got like Fred Warner at linebacker or someone to akin to that, you have to dedicate like a safety or a corner, your nickel, to Bijan Robinson, and that's like you follow him around. You got to treat him like you treat a number 1 wide receiver, because you never know where he's going to end up, and then you might end up having a light box to try to account for getting somebody out there to cover him, and then they're just going to run the ball at you. And good luck, unless you got Jalen Ramsey playing in the nickel responsible for Bijan, chances are your nickel's not going to make not going to make the play. He's not going to be able to shed the block and make the play on Bijan. It's just not going to happen. And he'll outrun everyone on the field. He's always the fastest guy on the field. He's always the shiftiest guy on the field. He's shockingly sometimes even the strongest one. Like, you'll see him fight through arm tackles. You'll see him look dead to rights and just fight through a tackle and break through and get that extra 5-6 yards, and taking 2 guys to bring him down at times. It's just unheard of to have a guy with this level of completeness to his game, the way that Bijan does. And then, of course, I talked about earlier the extension of the run game, the screen passes, the running out into the flats, quick passing games out there. He's just a complete weapon. And when you have Kevin Stefanski comes with this type of an offense in there, a guy like Bijan has to be just salivating at it, because you see the type of success backs like him have in this type of offense. Christian McCaffrey immediately comes to mind. And for all intents and purposes, Bijan has had Christian McCaffrey-esque seasons, right? You want to see him get into the end zone a lot more, but that's also just the offense not having the ability outside of Bijan to execute, which you're hoping Kevin Stefanski brings, and the ability to use Drake London and Kyle Pitts a lot better. Even though both of them have been used relatively fine, there's just so much more there to unlock in both of them. But you could look at this team and go, we're going to get that that Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel production season out of London, Pitts, and Bijan. With Bijan leading the way that you see McCaffrey doing in San Francisco, I guess you can be concerned about the downgrade of the depth by losing Tyler Algier, who I stand by has the worst luck out of any back in the league. Came in as a rookie, had a great rookie season, but here's Bijan. They draft Bijan, and then he finally leaves after his rookie contract's over, goes to Arizona. I'm going to be the starter in Arizona, and here comes Jeremiah Love, who's basically another version of Bijan Robinson coming out of college. But I think that Bijan has been able to prove that he can be 350 touches a year, maintain his durability, incredibly durable back. I guess you do have to be concerned about running him into the ground maybe a little too much. And I think that there'll be potentially more of that now with a lesser depth group here. But Brian Robinson Jr. has been a sneaky good back at times during his period in Washington, especially when he first came into the league out of Bama. He was actually like a good low-end starter. Hasn't really ever gotten back to that. Sort of been like settling here at a running back, low-end running back 2 quality lately. But in such a running back friendly system like this one, I think that his little mixture of power could actually be beneficial as a good change of pace for this offense. And with Bijan's receiving ability, there's a world where you can have both of them on the field really at the same time and just create, chaos for the opposing defense trying to make that type of adjustment. I don't know how often we're going to see it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did see it at certain points throughout the season. But just a great running back room. From a pass blocking perspective, you hope that you don't need to keep one of them in. You hope you don't have to keep Bijan in because he is such a great offensive weapon. But again, if you do find yourself in a situation like that, that's when I think you'll see Bijan on the field with Brian Robinson Jr. in the backfield to sort of be the guy to stay in the backfield, maybe to pick up a block, pick up a blitzer, or help out, chip an end or whatever. Or maybe that's when you see Austin Hooper get a lot more playing time as a second tight end, more traditional tight end, to sort of stay in for some max protection type schemes. It's just, Bijan is... I don't know. I don't know what else I can say positive about him that won't just be redundancy and repeating myself but just an exceptional talent. And he's going to be behind a very, very good offensive line. An offensive line that, despite losing Caleb McGarry at right tackle to retirement, is still 4th to 7th in pass blocking for me and 6th to 7th in run blocking. They added Jawan Taylor and Wanya Morris as the competition there really at right tackle to replace Caleb McGarry. Jawan Taylor obviously has the inside track on that. He is a better player than Wanya Morris, but stealing the 2 Kansas City tackles seemed to be the strategy of Kevin Stefanski to replace Caleb McGarry. The depth is going to be a concern here, but just from a starting 5 perspective, it's hard to find much better than that. There aren't that many better overall, especially. Usually you'll have an offensive line that's really good at one of these things and not so great at the other. This is one of the rare groups where they're just a complete offensive line where you can do anything you want. And it starts with Jake Matthews, the veteran. Had a bit of a down year last year. Didn't play like the top level tackle, but I didn't want to punish him all that much for having this down year because he's been so consistently elite as a pass protector for his entire career. And last year there was just too much, instability in the coaching staff and whatnot in the quarterback position for it to really be all that fair for him. And now his role is really much different than it ever has been in his career, because with 2 left-handed quarterbacks, you're now the front side protector rather than the backside protector. And that may not sound significant if you're just playing Madden, but it is a significant difference in how defenses attack you, how you shift your blocking, how you slant your offensive line to open up windows for your quarterback. it is very different. It's literally the opposite way of what you were used to. So Jake Matthews is doing a lot of things that maybe he's not all that used to doing, like getting used to shifting to the front side of a defensive lineman or whatever, trying to figure out where the best way to go is to get the passing lane for a left-handed quarterback as opposed to a right-handed quarterback, and understanding how defenses attack the front side of a quarterback compared to the back side of a quarterback. He spent his whole career up until really last season being the guy who saw defenses attack the backside of the quarterback. Now it's the front side, so it is a little bit different. It's a little bit different as to how he'll be getting help, for example, from a tight end or a running back. It's changing how they'll slant and stunt in front of him and change the timing of an inside linebacker blitz, for example. All these things get slightly adjusted, so it is a period where now that he's had a full year of doing it, now that he's completely going to be prepared for the left-handed quarterback, we'll see if he can get back to that high level that I really expect him to be. At some point, you're a veteran, your football IQ is so high, it's just a matter of getting the feet right after having that muscle memory for so long with the feet and the hands and the eye movement and where you check for bandits coming in and all that. It takes a little bit of adjustment time. We'll call last year that adjustment time for Jake Matthews. I expect him to get right back to where he was. Next to him, you got Matthew Bergeron, who's been just a solid guard. Much of what you'll see from this offensive line in general is that they're not really all that. No player is actually that bad at anything, really, especially the top four guys that they got. And Bergeron has improved a little bit every year. I think he's a great starter for run blocking. I think he's a good pass protector for an interior guy, especially because he can work some double teams more often than not with his center Ryan Nuzeel, who had to replace Drew Dahlman, one of the top centers in the league, just a year ago, but came in still a great run blocker, lacking in pass protection. But again, as a center, him and Matthew Bergeron, I think, are going to be working some double teams a lot. Especially there on the front end, because a lot of the stuff that now is going to happen from an interior rush will be happening from the front side of the quarterback, which is now on the left side. So that actually kind of benefits Bergeron and Nuzeel to work together there. While on the other side, Chris Lidstrom is going to be able to be singled up on a 3 technique, on a 4-eye technique, who's coming in on a blitzing linebacker. And that really plays into his wheelhouse as well, because he's still a very good he's still a good pass protector, but he is an elite level run defender. And he sort of fell into the same category last year that Jake Matthews did, where he was so great at pass blocking when he understood the responsibility of the front side guard in pass protection. Then the shift to the backside guard protection, again, sort of the same thing as Jake Matthews. It changes things for you. It changes where your responsibilities lie. It changes that muscle memory that you've created over your career. But I thought that he had some good performances. I thought there were some performances where maybe he looked like he was sort of instinctually going a certain way when it should have been the opposite. And now with this added offseason, I think we can say that him and Jake Matthews should be able to get themselves back on track here as the elite level offensive lineman on this team. From a run perspective, he's just fantastic. He was the number 1 graded zone blocking guard in the NFL last season out of 57 eligible guards. And that is playing right into the hands of Kevin Stefanski in this wide zone offense that they're going to run. You're going to see him there at the first level, second level, getting up into the third level even. Such a tremendous athlete. And he's going to be clearing a lot of running lanes for Bijan Robinson going left and to right. Just a matter of what side Kevin Stefanski is going to want to use at that given time. You know, Lidstrom is as sure of a thing as it comes in the NFL for a run blocking guard. That doesn't really change based upon the handedness of the quarterback, so that's a huge advantage for him, as that was really what his game was in general. It was a good pass protector, could stand on an island by his own, an elite level run blocker. Now, get the pass defending, get the feet underneath yourself, get in the film room, understand what's coming, understand the stunts and stuff like that they run on the backside compared to the front side, and it'll come. It'll definitely come for him. We talked about Jawaan Taylor there a little bit. He comes in as the starting right tackle as of right now. I expect him to maintain that job, as said before. Not a great run blocker, so for me, with Caleb McGarry, this was probably the number one run blocking offensive line, because that was really a strength of McGarry's game. That right side of the Falcons offensive line for run blocking during that Lindstrom and McGarry peak, you couldn't beat it. You really couldn't beat it. Now it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit lesser, and we'll see how Jawaan Taylor develops with all these studs really next to him that are really good next to him. Him being the worst offensive lineman that you have on the field really shows how high of a floor this offensive line truly has, because he's not a bad player. He's definitely a starting caliber player. You just don't want him to be the best offensive lineman that you got, because he just doesn't have like the highest ceiling of a player. But I think his floor is nice, where him paired up with Chris Lindstrom, I think Lindstrom's got a good enough IQ, understands the offense well enough that he's going to be able to make these communications to Jawaan Taylor. And I think we should see some chemistry pretty early on. But just really, this is, along with Bijan Robinson, the stars of this offense, and their ability to run the football is what's going to really drive this entire offense forward this season. So overall, it is my 18th ranked offense. Tier 3 coaching. They're 27th in pass offense. That really comes down to what we talked about with the weapons and what we talked about more specifically with the quarterback position. But they have the number 3 run offense. Bijan, that offensive line, the compliments of the coaching staff, it all melds in so incredibly well. Where at the very least, the running attack is so good. It's going to be able to keep this team afloat, keep this offense moving forward. And if you can execute in the play action game and in those short to intermediate areas, you could actually have a high functioning offense. Now let's go to the defensive side of the ball, and it's the front four that just has been the Achilles heel of the Atlanta Falcons on the defense side of the ball for so long, it feels now. So this is where the defensive line, it comes in 31st to 32nd in pass rush, and that is if James Pierce is on the field and available to play. So it is just not it is not a good group for pass rush. They're 22nd to 25th in run defense, but they're going to be incredibly vulnerable up the middle. But we'll start with James Pierce Jr. here, who, let's just pretend he's getting away with all his abusive crimes, we'll call them. Let's say he's getting away with it. He took 591 snaps last year. If he is suspended for a month or two, probably going to get the same amount there. I expect him to be used much more as a 3-down guy when he is available. He did have 11 sacks. That was 12th in the league. Only 9 tackles and 3 tackle assists. He was 59th of 63 edge players in missed tackle percentage, so can't really get guys down. Wasn't a whole lot of a threat in the run defense anyway. 121st of 127 eligible edge players in stops percentage. He was 19th in batted balls. He was 21st in forced fumbles. He did have the sacks, the 11 sacks, but he was 36th of 60 in pressures. He was 41st in pass rush win percentage, 56th in hits, and 25th in hurries. So he wasn't producing a whole lot, but when he did win, more often than not, he was able to finish. Now, that is just simply not a sustainable way to be a pass rusher and be highly productive. More often than not, where you have succeeded in pass rush win percentage and pressures is generally where you're going to land in terms of total sacks produced. But he was getting some help all around last season that was assisting in him getting higher in the sack total than you would expect. You want to see him get more physical in run defense. kind of the way he gets physical with women, I guess. You want to see him do that to opposing offensive tackles. And then maybe you'll get some really hard-nosed run defense from James Pierce Jr. this upcoming season. Just a shame that the character concerns that caused him to drop in the draft within 12 months immediately came to the forefront. And, the legal system seems to be giving him a pass. So see how much of the NFL does the same. Because in terms of just being a pure pass rusher, he does have some really good upside here. So we'll see Jeff Ulbrich rolls him out. Opposite of that, next to him, you have this incredibly undersized interior defensive line that we spoke of before. Zach Harrison and Brandon Dorlus, they're both sort of these 3-4 defensive ends, like these undersized interior defensive linemen who are both going to get significant play across all drives, across all situations, which is going to leave this team incredibly vulnerable because you can't just continuously play this undersized and expect to have a lot of success. Now, I would almost be more comfortable if they were sort of rotationals amongst each other, where, you get Zach Harrison more as getting more of the reps, and then in more of the running situations, you get Dorlus in there. I think that would be a more effective way of using them as compared to what's projected right now. And you got Mason Smith, who is coming in to be your nose tackle, which is kind of crazy. It's not that they don't have depth guys, but Deshaun Hand is sort of in between Harrison and Smith in terms of his play style. You got Laquel London, who can be a run defender. You got Chris Williams, who can be a rotational piece, sort of the opposite of Mason Smith here. You got Ontario Thompson, the rookie, who not much of a pass rush, can be a run defend guy if you need him to, I guess, in part of a rotation. But this interior defensive line rotation is incredibly concerning. And just the overall lack of size on this defensive line amongst the expected significant contributors, it doesn't present for a defense that's going to have a lot of success in the trenches, which is where you really need to start. Even off the edge, James Pierce Jr., you got Samson Ebukam, the veteran, who kind of is what he is. Azeez Ojulari, again, kind of is what he is. Not these big body guys who are going to be particularly super physical. Then you got Jalen Walker, who's linebacker / edge player, going to be locked into the edge position this upcoming season. Sort of the opposite of what you had in James Pierce Jr. Not a great pass rusher, but did some good things in the run defense. You want to see him improve on that pass rush. You drafted him as highly as you did with the expectation he was going to give you a great pass rush, and he just didn't do that. He was 69th in pressures out of 121, 71st in pass rush win percentage, 74th in quarterback hits, 75th in quarterback hurries. On 483 defensive line snaps, that's brutal. That's just brutal production. That's edge 3 production here from a top 15 draft pick just last year. I understand there's some learning curves converting from an off-ball linebacker to a true edge player. It took Joseph Osai a while to sort of find his groove that he just found last year after a couple of years in the league. So I kind of understand it, but you need a lot more from Jalen Walker. You need these two young edge guys going into their second season to really pick it up. From a missed tackle perspective, 28th in missed tackle percentage, so he was pretty good. He was a pretty sure tackler. That helps in the run game. That helps get physical in the run game. But he doesn't really have a whole lot of pass rush moves. He's kind of a one-dimensional pass rusher at the moment, which I guess you can kind of expect because you drafted him on his potential. But at some point throughout last year, it never looked like he was developing and getting better, and There wasn't a whole lot of experimentation. It was a lot of him just trying to do what he got away with in college that just wasn't working here at the next level. So we'll see how he comes out and responds. We'll see how Jeff Ulbrich and the defensive line coach work together to get him more diversity in his game. That's just significantly lacking at this point in time. But from overall, it's a very small, shallow group up front that is going to leave this defense incredibly vulnerable throughout the season. And there is some veteran free agents out there. I'm surprised they haven't thrown significant offers at some of them. We'll see how this training camp and summer camp and all that plays out as we get closer to the regular season, and how much they're going to add and subtract from this group in particular. Mostly add, I would say, I would hope, to try and at least create a defensive line that can compete on both sides of the offense, passing and run defense. Right now, it doesn't seem like they can do either, but they're not doing themselves any favors by being as small as they are. Coming over to the linebackers, they are 29th to 30th in coverage and 23rd to 26th in run defense. It's a one-man show. It's a one-man show with Divine Diablo, the converted safety, former Las Vegas Raider, who comes in and he's got at least a little bit of balance here despite the size. From last year's 64 tackles, 14 assists, he was 17th of 59 in missed tackles percentage, 7th of 58 in stops. So he was doing really well as being a sure arm tackler, not making huge mistakes. He was 5th of 52 in completion percentage allowed, 8th in passer rating allowed, 9th in man coverage, 5th in zone coverage, number 1 in pass breakups. So he definitely had a really good season last year. He was able to get some production for this team, for his team last year. And we'll see how that translates this year, where the expectation is going to be that he's going to have to produce like this this upcoming season, especially with the lack of what's going on in front of him. Now, his size mixed with the undersize of the interior defensive line of this team is going to significantly affect his ability in run defense. The lack of size is going to leave this team incredibly vulnerable. You're going to have these 300-pound offensive linemen with 60, 70-pound weight advantages almost on a weekly basis, it seems, against a lot of what they have going on with their defensive line in front of them. So it's going to put Divine Diablo and Christian Harris and whoever else they have there in some vulnerable spots, because you don't want Divine Diablo dealing with a lot of size. You want him to be able to have some sort of sideline-to-sideline pursuit, really work out against teams that run like a wide zone offense, like his own offense is going to be running this season. That would be a really good spot for him to be in. And then being able to sit there, a quarterback spy, sit in some soft zones. And he's really good at passing off the zones. He had a really good year last year in terms of being stickier in man coverage, disguising the man coverage with some zone coverage. Being aggressive at the point of attack with the ball, and that just comes from his time in college as being a safety. He actually translated that really well, probably the best he has in his career so far at the NFL level. You just want to see him play with a little bit more strength at the point of attack, obviously, and maybe put on some size to compensate for what he's probably going to need to make up for what's going on in front of him. Now, there are some interesting pieces next to him. Christian Harris was brought in from Houston. He's going to be that linebacker too. It's sort of been set that way. But there's not going to be a lack of competition, so to speak. JT Bertrand is there. He just, not great. But Troy Anderson has had some moments in his young career, for sure. We'll see if he can maybe get himself back on a trajectory upwards rather than sort of plateauing and maybe sinking a bit since he first came into the league. But the real wild card, I think, is going to be Harold Perkins, the linebacker from LSU, who at one point was looked at incredibly highly in the pre-draft process and in the summer scouting processes, and then fell off significantly. I think he's the one that's going to have the inside track, if there is any, to get the most snaps under his belt this upcoming season outside of these top two. I think he's going to be given the most opportunities to break out as linebacker 2, or maybe a more traditional early down backer, while Divine Diablo sort of works as linebacker 3 in running situations and then comes in those nickel and dime packages as the linebacker to give them some more speed while also providing some run support. It's just another group on this defense, kind of like what we just talked about with the defensive line, that just doesn't have that potential, that potential ceiling where you can at least get excited at the potential of something. This is just like, it's just another group that you're hoping just don't suck, because we got such great stuff going on the back end. And this is the back end I'm talking about, the defensive backs, and they are 7th to 9th in pass coverage for me. A great group, a very deep group here. We'll start with the top 3 corners. Like, there's significant play here, starting with AJ Terrell. Just a really good starting caliber back, like a number 1. You can put him on one side of the field, and he's got that side of the field pretty much handled. You know, he can match up really well against most other wide receivers. He did take 12 penalties last year, which you don't love, but he was 8th in pass breakups and 2nd overall out of 74 corners in terms of forced incompletions percentage. So he was out there really being aggressive, really being sticky, breaking up passes. He only took 10 snaps in the slot, so you ain't going to see him in there. He is a strictly outside guy. Was targeted 60 times, gave up 35 catches. He allowed 3 touchdowns, had no interceptions. So you want to see him get some more turnovers. The 10 pass breakups are still very good. Again, 8th out of 74 corners. But you want to see him turn over the ball. I think that's a huge key for this defense this year, is to help out their offense, is to take advantage of those moments and get those turnovers. Because AJ Terrell has been really a steady, like tier 2 starting corner, where he's like that middle of the pack cornerback 1, who, if you put great compliments next to him and allow him maybe just work one side of the field where he's comfortable and get somebody else to do the other, you're going to get a lot of success. And that's what they have with his partner, Mike Hughes, who, after a slow start with the Minnesota Vikings it feels like back in the day, it feels like he's been in the league forever. He's having like this, since getting to Atlanta, really just having this great, like, second half of your career bump, right? He allowed 3 touchdowns last year, 29th. He had only 1 interception. So again, sort of the same thing as AJ Terrell. You want to see him get some turnovers more. He was targeted 66 times, gave up 37 catches. He was 20th out of 74 corners in terms of completion percentage allowed. Didn't have a high forced incompletion percentage that comes with having only 3 pass breakups. And he was 28th of 74 in terms of passer rating allowed. Unlike Terrell, did not take a lot of penalties, which I think does contribute to giving up the 426 yards and only having the 3 pass breakups. I think those things sort of go hand in hand, not playing that super aggressive style that you get from AJ Terrell on the other side of the field. But we'll see how they mix and match those two, and if they're going to stick to one side of the field or if they're going to just work some matchups from week to week and have them follow around a certain wide receiver from week to week. I do think that they're relatively similar in their abilities that they're going to be able to provide for you. I do think that Mike Hughes is inevitably on the downward side of his career, but that's why you go and you get AJ Terrell's brother Avion from Clemson, who he comes in and, last year in college football, he ranked with 3 touchdowns allowed. He had 5 pass breakups. He only took 2 penalties. He took 110 snaps in the slot, and I think that's significant here because you'd have two pure traditional outside corners in Hughes and AJ Terrell. And I think Avion's ability in run defense as well allows him to be the perfect candidate to be your full-time slot cornerback when you want to go into those nickel packages. And I think inevitably the plan is to have the Terrell brothers as your outside guys as Mike Hughes eventually ages out of the NFL at some point here. Again, it feels like he's a 15-year veteran. I should have checked what he was, but Terrell comes in. He played really well at Clemson. He's got a nice mix of physicality to his game to go with some finesse. It's just a matter of, getting him up to that NFL speed against NFL receivers, because he wasn't like what we saw in Chris Johnson at San Diego State, where he just blew people away. Now, the competition was obviously a lot harder at Clemson than San Diego State. So he did finish 48th of 134 eligible corners in man coverage, 29th in zone. So against high-level college talent, he's in the top 50 and top 30. But that's also why he's not a first-round pick. Coupled with the size concerns and all that. It's weird. He lacks the size, but he doesn't lack the physicality really. Like, he can be very aggressive. It just, against NFL receivers, there's a significant difference than at the college level. So we'll see. He's not in a position where he needs to be thrust into the lineup immediately either. He's going into a very deep corner situation with some really good players, a lot of experience as well. So there's no need to really rush him into, you're allowed to now play him in the most advantageous scenarios for himself. You even got Clark Phillips out there who still comes in, grades out really well. But I talk about Avion Terrell being the potential slot guy because right now it's Billy Bowman who's your nickel. And I just despise everything about Billy Bowman's game, especially last year. We won't spend a lot of time on him, but it should be very much an open competition between Terrell, Clark Phillips to fill that slot role over Billy Bowman on a more full-time basis. I also think that's why you draft Avion Terrell. Then you get to the safety group, and what a combination. Maybe the best safety combo in the whole league, starting with Jesse Bates, one of my favorite players in the whole league going back to his time in Cincinnati. Played 530 box snaps, 420 true free safety snaps, 130 snaps in the... So he was playing all over the place last year. He had 70 tackles, 29 assisted tackles. He was specifically credited with 39 targets, 27 catches allowed. So he was right in the middle of the pack of all the eligible safeties. But he was playing in so many different scenarios. So he wasn't just kind of locked into one place. When you're playing all that, you're covering all different types of guys. You're in man coverage, you're in zone coverage, you're blitzing, you're doing countless amount of things. And that's what Jesse Bates brings to this Atlanta defense, is that level of versatility that is almost missing in a lot of the more traditional people that play the position. And his versatility is really something that helps bring out the best in all the other players because it allows them to play matchups. It allows them to be diverse and versatile against opposing offenses and play them situationally. So if you're playing a team that's particularly strong in the tight end and slot position, you can have Jesse Bates drop down and play in those slot areas, play in the box, play a heavier box because he does bring some good run support to your team. So he can play in a heavier box if you're playing more of a run-centric team, for example, especially because they do lack so much size. The ability to have a guy like Bates come down and play in the box and be an effective run defender does help cover that up to some degree. Now, it's not a perfect fix because Jesse Bates at the end of the day is a defensive back. He's not some physical linebacker, but he is a proof positive for the run defense in that sense as well. He can cover a whole bunch of different body types and physical traits. And when you have his partner in crime, second-year player Xavier Watts, who can do almost the exact same thing. Look, 544 box snaps, 406 safety snaps, 133 snaps in the slot. Almost identical to what you had with Jesse Bates. Now, what does that say? that says you have this type of defensive safety system where you can show two high safety, you can show a two shell, and then rotate either one of them down at your disposal, and it allows you to be incredibly unpredictable with that. Where's the safety crashing down? On what side of the field? Is it always on the strong side? Is it always on the weak side, back side of the play, far side of the field, short side of the field? You can play this so many different ways, and when Xavier Watts produces at such a great level, he was the 7th rated safety when lined up in the slot out of 44, 35th in passer rating allowed. He was 2nd in interceptions. He allowed 3 touchdowns, but he was 10th in forced incompletion percentage. He did a fantastic job as a complement to Jesse Bates, where other teams would have found the redundancy in these types of players. When you have these guys who can come down, play in the slot, a guy who can play deep, they have all the versatility, you can confuse an opposing offense. And I expect them to use this again even more. Jeff Ulbrich really finding a rhythm with these guys on the backside to help out with the run defense where it's needed, to not be afraid to drop a guy into the slot or into the box. And it's just it's such a tremendous strategical advantage to have this type of versatility that they have from their safeties. And then you throw in, and then you got Sidney Brown, who you acquired from the Philadelphia Eagles, who, if you need to play like a much larger, more physical game, you could run the 3 safety set with Xavier Watts, Jesse Bates playing a slot and box safety role, and then Sidney Brown, who has a lot less ability in the run defense, a lot less physicality, playing a deep safety role, playing that deep center field. And now you've also got the support underneath, you got the heavier box, and you still have some sideline to sideline capabilities there on the back end. It's such a well put together group that it makes it that much even more tragic of what's going on in front of them, that these guys are being asked to do so much that their talent level may not be necessarily reflected well in the box scores. Like you talk about Jesse Bates and the amount of yards he gave up, where he ranked, where he was graded out as a slot guy, how many touchdowns he allowed, all that kind of stuff. That does not necessarily speak to how talented he is, because when you got guys who can't get support from their pass rush, these guys are going to be hung out to dry to some large degree. That's why I think it's important to get Avion Terrell and Sidney Brown in there. Capable guys you can put on the field, who you don't have to force onto the field into unadvantageous situations. It actually enhances your defensive back group in order to get the most out of them, to help out, get some coverage sacks now ahead of you. Maybe you have to play a lot smaller on the back end, but you get some run support in from Watts, from Bates, from Terrell, even from Hughes and AJ. Like, you get these decent run defenders, physicality guys, while also getting good coverage skills on the back end. It's as close to a perfect group as you can get, obviously 7th to 9th, depending on how they mix in Billy Bowman with Avion Terrell and Clark Phillips, but still such a fantastic group. But they are such a fantastic group with almost nothing else going on in front of them. That's why they come in as the 27th ranked defense for me. 26th pass defense, 29th run defense, tier 3 in terms of their defensive coaching. It's a very one-dimensional defense. Great coverage skills like we discussed, great defensive back group, but they got nothing of substance right now in that front 7, waiting for guys to develop, waiting for guys to be a breakout star, and to really make something happen there. How Jeff Ulbrich schemes that up is going to be something to have to watch throughout this season. Then you get to the schedule here. I actually have them going over their expected 6.5 over-under on wins. They have the 28th strength of schedule, where it's a .465. And so they have 3 games where I'm like, these are games I got them definitely winning. The home games against the Saints and the Carolina Panthers. The game against Cleveland, I think, is really, really good draw for them. And then, the away games against Carolina and New Orleans, those games can really go either way. The games against Tampa, both of them, I feel can go either way as well. You get Pittsburgh on the road. You get Minnesota and Washington on the road. You wish you got those teams at home. You draw Green Bay, Baltimore, San Francisco, Detroit, Kansas City. Those are some tough games. That's probably the 5 games where I go, these are losses for sure. But they are in a perfect position, I really feel, to at least get to that 7-8 wins plateau. Because when you have 3 guaranteed wins out there, then you got Pittsburgh, New Orleans, Chicago, the 2 against Tampa, Cincinnati, Minnesota, Washington, and then the away game with Carolina. Those are 9 winnable games to go with the 3 that I feel you've already gotten in the bag. So it's a potentially 12 win season if all things are considered. Now, even if they win just half of those games, they're going to exceed that 6.5 wins. So I think it's an advantageous schedule to get them maybe some confidence and a little bit of momentum. So overall, they are my 20th ranked team, 24th head coach, 18th offense, and the 27th ranked defense. It's going to be an interesting year of potential just mediocrity, but could sneak a division win perhaps. And there it is. My number 20 team, the Atlanta Falcons. We're in the top 20 for the 2026 Deep Dive Series, guys. Subscribe to the channel if I haven't covered your team already, or if I have, please still subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos. Leave in the comment section below what you think of the Falcons, what you think of the grades I gave some of their position groups, where you agree, where you disagree. I really appreciate it. Thumbs up the video even if you disagree. It helps with the algorithms, helps me grow. Race to 1,000 subscribers. If I'm not there already, maybe I'm there already, and you're watching this pre-1,000 subs. And if you aren't, let's get to 1,000. If you are, look at us. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? See you guys in the next video.